Imagine a world where two cities are only a few miles apart, yet one is still living in the year 1751, while the other has already entered 1752. At the border, merchants argue because contracts are suddenly not yet due. Soldiers are unsure which day they are supposed to march. Worshippers do not know when Easter will be celebrated. This is not fiction. This was England in 1752, the year it was finally forced to accept the Pope's calendar after refusing it for 170 years. On the surface, a calendar appears to be nothing more than a tool for counting days. But for empires, it is the pulse of power. Whoever controls how people measure time controls, planting cycles, tax seasons, military mobilization, and religious rituals. From Caesar's Rome to Gregory's Vatican, the calendar was never just a grid of numbers. It was a political manifesto, embedded into daily life. Ancient Rome began with a 10-month calendar, starting in Martius, named after Mars, the god of war, and ending in December. The 10th month, time, for Romans, revolved around warfare. Armies marched only when the sun returned and the land thawed. The frozen winter months, when neither farming nor fighting was possible, were treated as dead time. They belonged to no month at all. But as Rome expanded, one king understood the danger of temporal fragmentation. Numa Pompilius realized that an empire could not survive if its territories measured time differently. He reformed the calendar by adding two new months, January and February. January was named after Janus, the two-faced god who looks both backward and forward, a symbol of transition and authority. From that moment on, Rome no longer counted time by battle seasons, but by administrative cycles. What seemed like a technical fix was actually an ideological turning point. Rome shifted from a tribal, warrior mindset to a bureaucratic state mentality. The calendar became the language of power, and Janus, the guardian of all gates, now guarded the gate of the year itself. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's calendar system had fallen into chaos. Each province, each religion, followed its own way of counting days. Harvests no longer aligned with festivals, and the empire's economy began to lose rhythm. Caesar understood a fundamental rule of empire. To rule territory, you must first unify time. In 406 BCE, he launched the most radical calendar reform in human history, advised by Sosigenes of Alexandria. Caesar introduced the Julian calendar, 365 days, with one leap year every 4 years. On the surface, it was an astronomical improvement. In reality, it was an administrative strike. Every land, from Gaul to Egypt, was forced to synchronize with Rome's temporal rhythm. One empire, one heartbeat, commercial contracts, tax schedules, military conscription, all were anchored to the same timeline. Caesar did not merely command armies, he commanded their time. After his assassination, senators tried to erase his influence. But the Julian calendar, his mathematical legacy, endured for centuries. They could kill the man. They could not kill the empire's clock. Even after the fall of Rome, Caesar's calendar survived, a ghost of imperial authority drifting through medieval kingdoms. But between the 5th and 15th centuries, power shifted to the church. And for the church, time belonged not to the sun, but to God. January 1, Caesar's chosen new year, was dismissed as a pagan Roman relic. Instead, the church adopted March 25, Lady Day, the Feast of the Annunciation. For centuries, Europe lived under two competing temporal rhythms, one inherited from ancient Rome, the other imposed by the medieval Vatican. Monasteries developed liturgical calendars, structuring time around saints' days and holy cycles. Each region, each denomination, followed its own spiritual clock. Time became a religious weapon. Whoever controlled the calendar controlled the bridge between heaven and earth. Yet within this fragmentation, tension grew between science and theology. Astronomers like Copernicus, and later Galileo Galilei, noticed that the church's calendar was drifting away from astronomical reality. Spring no longer began at the equinox. Easter, the foundation of the liturgical year, was slowly losing alignment with the cosmos. To preserve control over belief, Pope Gregory XIII performed temporal surgery in 1582. 10 days were erased from history, and the Gregorian calendar was proclaimed. Europe entered a new era, but not without resistance. Protestant nations denounced it as a Roman conspiracy to steal time. Once again, time became an ideological border. Nearly 2 centuries later, the world had changed. Scientific revolution, global trade, and maritime empires turned temporal misalignment into an economic liability. Britain, still using the Julian calendar, realized that without synchronizing with continental Europe, it would lose ground in trade, international contracts, credit systems, and maritime schedules all relied on the Gregorian calendar. So, in 1752, the British Parliament passed the Calendar Act. September 2 was followed by September 14. 11 days disappeared. People panicked. Riots erupted. Give us back our 11 days. But the ruling class understood the truth. This was no longer a religious issue. It was a matter of global economic power. From that moment on, the world entered the age of synchronization, where clocks no longer measured devotion to God, but productivity for markets. The Gregorian calendar became the global standard, not because it was astronomically perfect, but because it served commerce better. Later empires, British, French, and eventually American, embraced the same logic to rule the world. First, make everyone live on your time. Today, we measure time using UTC, a standard rooted in the Greenwich Observatory, the center of British imperial power in the 19th century. That is no coincidence. UTC, time zones, and the international calendar are modern versions of the same control mechanism. Global consensus disguised as science. The calendar has never been an innocent table of numbers. It is the ultimate weapon of order, an unwritten law binding every nation and culture. We may argue over religion, politics, or borders, but when the clock strikes midnight, whether in New York or Tokyo, everyone steps into the same new day. No treaty, no army, no empire of force has ever achieved such unity. Only a calendar has. And that is the greatest victory of empires, when all of humanity lives within the same rhythm they designed.